Welcome to my channel. Subscribe to the channel and listen to my stories every day. I always thought we were the couple everyone envied. Laura and I met in college and hit it off instantly. She was stunning, an undeniable beauty with a quick wit and charm that could win over anyone. I was drawn to her energy, the way she seemed to light up any room she entered. We married just a few years later, and for over a decade, I believed we were living a love story most people only dream about. Life wasn't perfect, of course. Whose life is? But we had built something solid, or so I thought. Our home, tucked away in a quiet suburb, was a haven of laughter, family dinners, and bedtime stories for Amanda and Jake. We were both busy with our careers, but we made it work. Or, at least, that's what I told myself during those fleeting moments of doubt. Lately, though, something felt off. Laura had always been busy with work, traveling for conferences and client meetings, but over the past year, those trips became more frequent. Her once detailed accounts of boring presentations and networking dinners became vague. Just the usual, she'd say, brushing off my questions. I dismissed my unease as paranoia. After all, trust was the foundation of any good marriage, right? But trust is a funny thing. You don't realize how fragile it is until it cracks. It was a Thursday morning when the first fisher appeared. Laura was rushing out the door for another one of her trips, a last-minute weekend getaway with a client she mentioned casually over dinner the night before. She kissed me goodbye, leaving the faint scent of her floral perfume lingering in the air. "Don't forget Amanda's soccer game on Saturday," she said. "And Jake's art project, he'll need your help." Her words felt rehearsed, her smile forced. I watched her leave, a gnawing sense of unease settling in my chest. The day passed in a blur of meetings and emails, but my mind kept drifting back to Laura. When I picked up the kids from school that afternoon, Amanda asked, "Why does Mom go away so much? Doesn't she miss us?" I froze. How do you answer a question like that without unraveling the image of a perfect family? "She's just really busy with work," I replied, forcing a smile. "She loves us very much." But did she? That question lingered as I tucked the kids into bed that night. Amanda's question had struck a nerve, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I chalked it up to exhaustion, telling myself I was overthinking things. Yet, deep down, I knew something wasn't right. The breaking point came the following evening. Laura had left her phone charging on the kitchen counter, a rare occurrence since she usually kept it close. As I was cleaning up after dinner, the screen lit up with a message that stopped me in my tracks. "Can't wait to see you this weekend. Last time was amazing." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The sender's name was Mark, someone I'd never heard her mention before. The casual intimacy of the message was unmistakable. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Was this a misunderstanding? A harmless joke? Or something far worse? I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I waited for her to call from her hotel. Her voice was light, cheerful, as if nothing was wrong. But I could hear it now, the tiny cracks in her facade. When she said she had an early meeting and needed to get some rest, I didn't push. "Good night," I said, hanging up and staring at my own reflection in the darkened window. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed every moment from the past year, piecing together the subtle changes in her behavior. The late-night texts she brushed off as work-related. The new lingerie she claimed was just for me, even though I hadn't seen it since she bought it. The way she seemed distant, yet overly affectionate at times, as if trying to mask something. The next morning, I hired a private investigator. I didn't want to believe she was cheating. I wanted to be wrong, to feel foolish for doubting her. But a part of me knew that I needed answers, cold, hard facts to either confirm my worst fears or put them to rest. The investigator, a no-nonsense man named Eric, assured me he'd be discreet. "You'll have your answers in a week," he said, handing me his card. Those 7 days felt like an eternity. I threw myself into work, trying to distract myself, but every quiet moment was filled with dread. I avoided Laura's calls during her trip, using the kids as an excuse. "Daddy's busy," Amanda told her during one call. When Laura got home on Sunday evening, she seemed relaxed, almost glowing. "Work trip was good?" I asked casually. "Yeah, it was fine," she replied, setting down her suitcase. "Exhausting, though. I'm just glad to be home." I watched her as she hugged the kids, her smile wide and genuine. For a moment, I doubted myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe Mark was just a colleague and the message was innocent. But the doubt didn't last long. A few days later, Eric called with the results of his investigation. "It's worse than you thought," he said. The call from Eric hung in the air like a storm cloud. I sat at my desk, gripping the phone, feeling the weight of his words pressing down on me. "It's worse than you thought." My voice was barely a whisper. "Tell me everything." Eric didn't sugarcoat it. He described how Laura had met Mark several months ago during one of her business trips. At first, it seemed innocent, professional lunches and friendly chats. But the dynamic shifted quickly. By their second meeting, they had booked a hotel room. "They've been meeting regularly," Eric said, his voice devoid of judgment, just stating the facts. This last trip was to a lakefront resort. Not a business trip, not even close. My stomach churned. The very foundation of my marriage, of the life I'd built, was crumbling beneath me. As Eric went on, recounting times, places, and even photos, a part of me shut down. He emailed me the evidence, but I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not yet. Hearing it was enough. "Do you need anything else from me?" Eric asked. "No," I said, my throat dry. That's enough." Hanging up, I sat in silence, staring at the screen of my laptop. The inbox notification blinked, the email with Eric's evidence sitting unopened. I didn't need to look at the photos to know they were real. I could feel the truth in my bones. When Laura came home that evening, I tried to act normal. Dinner was on the table, the kids were chattering about their day, and Laura greeted me with a kiss on the cheek. For a fleeting moment, I almost believed her. Almost. "Long day?" she asked, sitting across from me at the dining table. "Yeah," I replied, forcing a smile. "Busy as usual." Amanda told her about a new art project, and Jake proudly announced that he'd scored a goal in gym class soccer. Laura listened, laughed, and praised them both, slipping effortlessly into the role of doting mother. It was maddening. How could someone who betrayed us so deeply still fit so seamlessly into this picture of domestic bliss? After dinner, while the kids were watching TV, Laura and I tidied the kitchen. It felt like any other night, except for the storm raging inside me. Every glance she threw my way, every casual touch, felt like a betrayal. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I wasn't ready, not yet. Instead, I tested the waters. "You've been traveling a lot lately," I said, keeping my tone light. "Everything okay at work?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second before replying. "Yeah, just a busy season. You know how it is. Mark keeping you on your toes?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. Her reaction was subtle but telling. Her hands froze mid-dish, her eyes flickering toward me before she quickly composed herself. "Mark? Oh, the client? Yeah, he's demanding, but it's all part of the job." I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but inside, I was seething. She lied so effortlessly, as if she had practiced this exact conversation in her head. Did she think I was that naive? That blind? Later that night, after the kids were in bed, I opened the email. The photos hit me like a punch to the gut. There they were, Laura and Mark, sitting across from each other at a candlelit table, walking hand in hand along a beach, and kissing in front of a hotel. Each image was a dagger, slicing through any lingering hope I had that this was all some misunderstanding. I scrolled through the report, detailing their meetings, text exchanges, and even receipts from the resort. The final straw was a photo of her at the hotel bar, wearing the lingerie she had told me was just for me. My fists clenched, and I slammed the laptop shut, unable to look at it anymore. Sleep was out of the question. I spent the night pacing the living room, replaying every moment of the past year. The signs had been there all along, but I had ignored them, choosing to believe in the woman I thought I married. By morning, my anger had crystallized into resolve. I wasn't just going to confront her, I was going to make her face the consequences of her actions. I started planning. The first step was securing the house and protecting the kids. I contacted a lawyer, explaining the situation and sharing the evidence. She assured me that I had a strong case, especially with the photos and Eric's report. Custody shouldn't be an issue, she said. Judges don't look kindly on parents who engage in infidelity. Next, I opened a new bank account. Laura and I shared everything, checking, savings, even the mortgage, but I wasn't going to let her take advantage of me financially. I transferred enough money to cover my expenses and set up automatic deposits from my paycheck. The rest, I left untouched, for now. With those steps in place, I turned my attention to the confrontation. It wasn't enough to simply call her out. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal, to understand the depth of the pain she had caused. That weekend, Laura suggested a family outing to the park. She was cheerful, even playful, as if everything was normal. Watching her interact with the kids, I felt a pang of sadness. For all her faults, she was a good mother. But even that couldn't excuse what she had done. As we sat on a bench, watching Amanda and Jake play on the swings, Laura leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. "This is nice," she said softly. "We don't do this enough." I didn't respond. Instead, I looked at her, studying her face. Was she genuinely happy in this moment, or was it all an act? Did she feel even an ounce of guilt for what she had done? That night, after the kids were asleep, I finally confronted her. "Laura," I said, standing in the doorway of our bedroom. "We need to talk." She looked up from her book, her expression puzzled. "What's wrong?" "I know about Mark." Her face went pale, and for the first time in years, I saw fear in her eyes. What are you talking about?" she stammered, but her voice lacked conviction. "I know everything," I said, stepping closer. "The trips, the hotel, the lies. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." She didn't respond right away. Instead, she set the book aside and buried her face in her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Her words ignited something inside me. "You didn't mean for this to happen?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You didn't mean to sneak around behind my back. To betray me and our kids. Don't give me that crap, Laura. You made a choice." Tears streamed down her face, but I felt no sympathy. Not yet. The room felt smaller, suffocating, as Laura sat on the edge of our bed, her face buried in her hands. Her tears fell freely, but they didn't stir the sympathy they once would have. Instead, they fueled the fire in my chest, a searing, relentless rage. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered again, her voice trembling. "Stop saying that," I snapped, cutting her off. "You didn't trip and fall into an affair, Laura. You planned this. You lied, over and over, to my face, to our kids. You didn't mean for this to happen. Don't insult me with that excuse." She flinched at my words, but I wasn't going to let up. I needed to hear her admit it, to fully own the betrayal that had shattered our lives. "How long?" I demanded. "How long have you been sneaking around with him?" She hesitated, her lip trembling. A few months. A few months? I repeated, incredulous. Try again. The investigator told me everything, Laura. I've seen the photos. I know about the hotel trips, the weekends you told me were work-related. How long? Her shoulders slumped as the fight drained out of her. A year, she finally admitted, her voice barely audible. A year. The weight of it slammed into me like a freight train. For 12 months, she had been living a double life, lying to my face while carrying on with another man. My hands clenched into fists at my sides, and I forced myself to take a deep breath, to stay in control. Why? I asked, my voice quieter now but no less intense. Why him? Why any of this? She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. I don't know, she said, shaking her head. I was unhappy. I felt like we were just going through the motions, like we'd lost the spark we used to have. And then Mark, he paid attention to me. He made me feel special. I stared at her, my jaw tightening. Special, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. So you destroyed our marriage because some guy made you feel special? Did it ever occur to you to talk to me? To tell me how you were feeling? Or was it easier to just throw it all away? I didn't want to hurt you, she said weakly. That was it. That was the line that broke me. You didn't want to hurt me. I exploded. You've been lying to me for a year, Laura. A year. Do you know what this has done to me? To us. You didn't want to hurt me. Don't pretend this wasn't deliberate. You knew exactly what you were doing. She broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, but I couldn't find it in me to comfort her. Not this time. The days that followed were a blur of cold, calculated moves. I went into full damage control mode, ensuring I was prepared for the fallout. Laura's apologies and pleas for forgiveness rang hollow, drowned out by the sheer enormity of her betrayal. She promised to end things with Mark, to do whatever it took to fix our marriage, but the damage was done. I couldn't unsee the photos, couldn't unknow the truth. One evening, I sat at the kitchen table with my lawyer, discussing the next steps. You've got a strong case, she said, tapping her pen against her notebook. The evidence is airtight and judges don't look kindly on infidelity. You'll have no trouble securing primary custody of the kids, especially if she continues to prioritize her extracurricular activities. I nodded, though the thought of uprooting Amanda and Jake's lives made my chest ache. They didn't deserve this, didn't deserve to lose the stability they'd always known. But they also didn't deserve to live in a house built on lies. Laura tried to make amends in her own way, doting on the kids and showering me with affection. She cooked elaborate meals, planned family outings, and even started seeing a therapist. But none of it felt genuine. It was damage control, not remorse. And I couldn't shake the feeling that she was more concerned about preserving her image than truly repairing what she had broken. The confrontation with Mark was inevitable, though it happened sooner than I expected. One evening, I stopped by Laura's office to pick her up, an olive branch of sorts, though my motives weren't entirely altruistic. As I pulled into the parking lot, I spotted them together. He was leaning casually against her car, laughing at something she had said. The sight of them sent a fresh wave of anger coursing through me. I didn't hesitate. I parked the car and strode toward them, my footsteps heavy with purpose. Laura's eyes widened when she saw me, and she quickly stepped back from Mark, her expression panicked. Mark, I said, my voice cold and sharp. I believe we need to have a conversation. He looked at me, his smug smile fading as he realized who I was. I don't think that's necessary, he said, his tone defensive. Oh, I think it is, I replied, stepping closer. You've been sleeping with my wife for a year. That warrants a conversation, don't you think? Laura tried to intervene, placing a hand on my arm. Please, let's just go, she pleaded. This isn't the time or place. I shook her off, my eyes locked on Mark. Did you know she had a family? 2 kids who adore her. Did that matter to you at all? He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. Of course it didn't. Because men like you don't care about the damage you leave behind. You think you can just waltz into someone's life, take what you want, and walk away unscathed. I'm not the only one at fault here, he said, his voice low. She made her choices. Oh, I'm well aware of that, I shot back. But I'm not here to let you off the hook. Stay the hell away from my family. If I see you near her, or my kids, again, you'll regret it. Mark held up his hands in mock surrender, a smirk tugging at the corners of his mouth. Fine. She's all yours. The arrogance in his tone made my blood boil, but I forced myself to walk away, knowing that punching him would only make things worse. That night, I told Laura she had a choice to make. If you want to fix this, you need to cut all ties with him, I said. No texts, no calls, nothing. And you need to earn my trust back, piece by piece. It won't be easy, and it won't be quick. But that's the only way this marriage survives. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll do whatever it takes, she said. I promise. But as I lay awake in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the nagging doubt. Could I ever truly trust her again? And more importantly, did I even want to? The weeks that followed were agonizing. Laura tried her best to act like the devoted wife and mother, as though sheer effort could erase the weight of her betrayal. She cancelled her phone contract, claiming she wanted a fresh start without Mark's contact information. She attended therapy sessions religiously, always returning with stories of breakthroughs and revelations. And yet, despite her outward dedication, I felt an insurmountable wall between us. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about the lies, the choices she made, and the person she had revealed herself to be. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning, that there was more beneath the surface. One evening, I received an unexpected call. It was Eric, the investigator. I know you said you didn't need more digging, he began, his tone hesitant, but something came up, and I thought you'd want to know. What is it? I asked, my stomach tightening. I've been monitoring Mark, just out of curiosity. Turns out, Laura wasn't the only woman he was seeing. He's been with at least 2 other married women, one of them works at your wife's office. My grip tightened on the phone. You're saying Laura knew about this? I can't confirm that, Eric said. But here's the kicker, Mark recently told someone he's been planning to leave the country. Something about avoiding fallout from the mess he's created. I thanked Eric and hung up, my mind racing. If Mark was leaving, why hadn't Laura mentioned it? Why was she still holding on to the narrative that she was working to rebuild our marriage? That night, as Laura tucked the kids into bed, I accessed the laptop she used for work. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for, a hidden folder buried within her email account. Inside were messages from Mark. My heart sank as I read them. I miss you. I'm leaving for Spain next week, but I want to see you one last time. You're still the only one who understands me. Let's make this happen before I go. Her replies were equally damning. I can't promise anything. He's suspicious, but I'll try. Maybe just one more time. I can't believe you're leaving. The most recent email, dated just 2 days ago, was a confirmation. She had booked a hotel room, under a fake name, for the coming weekend. The betrayal was worse than I had imagined. Even after everything, she hadn't stopped. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about reclaiming my life. The weekend arrived, and Laura told me she was going to a day-long workshop in the city. It's part of the therapy program, she said, her tone practiced and calm. I'll be back late, so don't wait up. I nodded, feigning understanding. Take your time, I said, kissing her on the cheek. We'll be fine. As soon as she left, I sprang into action. I had been planning this for days, and every piece was in place. I called Amanda and Jake's grandparents, who agreed to take them for the night. I packed a few essentials for them and dropped them off with a smile, promising a surprise outing the next day. Then, I drove to the hotel. Eric had provided me with the details of the booking, and it wasn't hard to get access to the floor where Laura and Mark's room was. I waited in the dimly lit hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. Part of me still hoped I was wrong, that Laura wouldn't show up, that she had finally chosen to do the right thing. But she did show up. I watched from a corner as she walked down the hall, her head on a swivel, as if checking to make sure no one saw her. She wore the same red dress she had claimed was just for special occasions. I felt a mix of anger and sadness, but I stayed rooted in place. She knocked on the door, and Mark opened it with a grin. They embraced, and I saw him pull her inside. It was time. I waited 10 minutes before knocking. When Mark opened the door, he froze, his smug expression vanishing instantly. Laura appeared behind him, her face a mask of shock and horror. "Mark," I said calmly, stepping into the room. "We need to talk." What are you doing here?" Laura stammered. Ignoring her, I pulled out a small envelope and handed it to Mark. He hesitated before opening it. Inside were copies of the photos Eric had taken, not just of him with Laura, but with the other women he had been seeing. His face turned ashen as he flipped through them. "You've been busy," I said. "And now your employers, your colleagues, and even your family will know exactly who you are." Mark's mouth opened, but no words came out. He turned to Laura, panic in his eyes. "You told him?" "She didn't have to," I said. "You're not as careful as you think." Laura tried to speak, but I silenced her with a glare. "You've made your choices, Laura. And now, I'm making mine." From my pocket, I pulled out a second envelope, this one addressed to her. Inside were divorce papers, meticulously prepared by my lawyer. "I'll be filing these first thing Monday morning," I said. "Consider this your notice." Her face crumpled, and she reached for me. "Please, we can fix this. I'll end it, I swear." "It's already over," I said, stepping back. "It's been over since the day you decided I wasn't enough for you." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and difficult conversations with the kids. Laura tried to fight for custody, but the evidence against her made her position untenable. I kept the house and primary custody of Amanda and Jake. Laura moved in with a friend, though I heard whispers that she was staying with Mark, at least until he skipped town, as Eric had predicted. The surprise, however, came a month later. One evening, as I was cleaning out our shared office, I found a flash drive tucked into a drawer. Curious, I plugged it into my laptop. It was a video file. Mark and Laura, recorded in a private moment at the hotel. But it wasn't just them. It included a conversation in which Mark admitted to using Laura, and others, for financial gain, encouraging them to dip into joint accounts or take out loans to fund his business ventures. He had been conning her all along. For the first time in months, I laughed. Not out of joy, but out of sheer disbelief. Laura had betrayed me, but she had also been played. It was poetic, in a way. Her decisions had led her down this path, and now she was paying the price. As for me, I was finally free.